Thank you very much. I stand before you today as evidence of the fact that what God starts, He will finish. On the 24th of July 2007, having read a script called Selma, God told me I will play Dr. Martin Luther King in the film Selma. It came during a time of prayer and fasting, and I know the voice of God. I auditioned for the role. The director at the time did not agree with God. You don't want to do that, by the way. In the meantime, I did a film called Lincoln. And in the first scene of that film, my character challenged Abraham Lincoln with a Gettysburg Address and said, "You cannot say these words, you have to actually act upon them. Maybe one day we'll get the vote." 7 years after God told me I would play this role, in another film called Selma, 100 years later. In Lincoln, I played a character in 1865. In Selma, I played Dr. King in 1965. "19 presidents later, my character, as Dr. King, asks the very same question. What God starts, He will finish. People have asked me severally, what was it like to step into Dr. King's shoes? It was a heavy burden to bear. As an actor, what you do is you place yourself in the mental space of the person you are playing. I felt his pain. I felt the burden. I felt the love he has for his family. I felt the love he still has for you, Dr. Bernice King. The incredible thing to me is that he was a man of words. We celebrate his oratory. But he wasn't just a talker of the word, he was a doer of the word. He walked it out every single day. Not only his life was under threat, his children's lives were under threat. I have 4 children myself. I cannot imagine walking through life every day knowing that there were people on earth who wanted to take my 4 children's lives, my wife's life, and then to leave them and go and do it anyway. That is incredible, my friends. I don't know that I could do it. The question I asked myself constantly was, how did he do it? In placing myself in Dr. King's shoes, when I had to give the address in front of the Capitol steps in Montgomery, we were deep into the shoot, and I had asked God to allow the spirit of Dr. King to flow through me. Careful what you pray for. In the run-up to the very last scene of the film, a palpable, indisputable fear of death crept over me. On the morning before I gave that speech on the Capitol steps, I felt a huge need to ask for the buildings around to be swept. I truly thought I wouldn't make it out alive. I'm an actor, I'm not Dr. King, but this was very real for me. And at the end of that day, I was shocked that I was still alive. I only stepped into his shoes for a moment. But I asked myself, how did he do it? There are no accidents with God. I believe it was no accident that he was named Dr. Martin Luther King. King. The eggs that Dr. Adams just talked about were a lie. They were telling everyone those eggs were thrown at that they are not a king. He was able to do what he did because he knew who he was. He was a king. He was a priest. He was ordained of God. He was a child of God, equal to every man. And he walked in that. That is how he was able to not have bitterness and anger in his heart. I've got to tell you, walking in his shoes, I was amazed that he didn't have bitterness and anger in his heart. My dad is here today. He flew in from the UK. Daddy, is my dad there? Recently, my dad and I were having a conversation. We are from Nigeria. He has 4 tribal marks on each cheek. And on his stomach is cut the word Bale, which means king. I didn't know this. I thought that tribal marks, as a lot of Nigerians have, predated slavery. They were a tradition that we have had for thousands of years. He said, no. Tribal marks came from the fact that when we were taken away from Africa, we marked ourselves so that when we made it back, our people knew who we were and where we were from. Oh, Lord. I am the first in my line in over 400 years not to bear those scars. The legacy of slavery is real. The scars we bear are real. The scars Congressman John Lewis bears are real. What I have arrived at is the fact that we cannot let them define us. When you look at my father's face, you see those scars. But when you dig a little deeper, on his stomach, it says king. In my industry, in Hollywood, we are celebrated more for being broken and subservient than playing kings, than being leaders, than being in the center of our own narrative. I stand before you today as a man who has played a king. So my charge to each and every one of us today, every time you drive down Martin Luther King Boulevard, every time we celebrate Dr. King's birthday, every time you say his name, let it remind you who you are. God bless you.